This is, of course, the second meeting of our book club on Peak. Subtitle Secrets from the New Science of Expertise.
Our correct subtitles is How All of Us Can Achieve Extraordinary Things. You're wrong.
That too. There are multiple versions of the book.
Yeah.
Hopefully they are close enough that we don't get any first mismatches.
Most of the time, when it comes to different editions, it's going to be between like font types and stuff like that. So there's usually not much different content at all.
The
regions
preface can change too, and
preface regions. They think that the French need more encouragement, so they renamed it to in order to make them more likely to buy. Us Americans are
the peak of
very
it's an important
science focused.
Book, so...
We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in our science education, and it still gets us fucking shit for brains. So whatever. Anyway.
Well, at least Peak in French teaches you how to be at the peak efficiency of making baguettes.
That's
pretty important.
No. My book is not in French. I imported my book.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Very, very nice. To be clear to anyone who is watching this, we are not racist against the French. It is a running joke that we have where we make fun
French
of Dilga.
French is an ethnicity, not a race.
Being the way. I just shouldn't have said anything. Anyway, to move on here. So to get started, chapter 2 is titled Harnessing Adaptability. At least it is in my edition. And the kind of big thing here is that the brain changes in response to practice, right? That's kind of the main idea. So one of the very, very early quotes that I kind of ran into, which I thought was kind of interesting, was, and because you can't see any changes in your brain, it's very easy to assume that there's nothing going on, right? He goes through that whole thing of, like, you don't get a six-pack on your forehead. You don't have to go out and buy new hats because the old ones don't fit anymore. And I'm, like, freaking rolling in my seat. It's, like, so funny. But yeah, like, very realistically, you don't see any physical changes as a result of you having built a new mental model or gotten smarter or having learned a thing, right? So you need other ways. You need other things that will help you to measure what you're doing, right? I mean, it all kind of comes back to metrics yet again, right?
You need metrics.
You need metrics in order to see what it is that is actually changing. If you don't have metrics, it's a black box inside of a flesh tube or something of that nature. So one thing that I've noticed is that a ton of the people that we work with, including ourselves, really struggle with feeling that like they aren't learning a lot of the time, right? Even, I propose, in situations where they are, right? And my belief is that the primary reason that this occurs is because we haven't set up good metrics to allow people to observe the changes that are happening in their play and in their brains. Thoughts from the field. Does that sound accurate? Does that sound inaccurate?
That's the most wrong thing I've ever heard. I can't. No.
Unbelievable. I can't believe
in my experience in the last 2 weeks has really, and even in music, has really ringed out to be true. Where I'm like, hold on a sec.
No.
Sorry about that.
All right.
But where was I? My mom was trying to ask me where her phone was. So I don't know.
Gotcha.
But when it comes to metrics, right? I've noticed a big difference in how much I feel like I'm making progress. Not even just winning games or whatever, but just feeling like, hey, look, I'm keeping track of how many times I get harassed, and it's gone down from 10 in the learning phase to 4 or something, right? And that's a pretty massive difference. So it's I can't say that I'm not learning, right?
Yeah.
You literally can't say that you're not improving if you have that sort of thing going on.
As long as you believe that getting harassed less means that you're closer to actually doing what you need to do, right? That's
Exactly.
another thing, is that you need to, in order for purposeful practice to work, you also need goals. You need to understand what it is that you're working towards. If you don't understand what you're working towards, you can't devise any metrics. That's one of the things that Doga and I kind of ran into earlier during our session, was that it's tough to make metrics when you don't have a
Fucking
clear idea.
finding metrics for purple belt stuff
yeah,
fucks me over.
So-
It is yikers. It is yikers, for sure.
You could just come up with metrics that you think might work, and if they don't, you just adjust them. I mean,
That's
something that,
basically
like-
that's the only thing I can do, because there's nothing else exists.
Mhm.
Yes, it's basically what I
It's
did.
like-
More bites.
hey, maybe the problem is that I need more camps by 10 minutes, and if nothing changes, then it's like, well,
Nah.
maybe I actually need more ganks by 10 minutes, or and then you can be like, sort of like,
Yeah. So it's so. There's too much that changes. These kind of metrics are way too general. But anyway, that's.
well,
shit.
it was just an example, Dilga.
Yeah. No, you're wrong.
No, you're wrong.
We're all wrong, but we'll be wrong together.
But at least we have a metric for us being wrong, which is that we hate each other. And as the amount that we hate each other increases, the amount that all of us are wrong increases. Therefore, we are achieving success.
It's a directly proportional relationship.
Yes, precisely.
But you ever see that episode of The Simpsons where like Homer goes to see like a drill sergeant for some reason, and the drill sergeant's like, "Now you don't like me, and I don't like you," and Homer's like, "Well, I like you," and then the drill sergeant's like, "Well, okay, I don't like you, and you like me. Now this is what we're gonna do."
Bless.
So funny.
I like that. So
That's just kind of what that reminded me of. Just like,
yes. So I think it would not necessarily be a bad thing to kind of have a discussion kind of following up from last week, where we talked about how metrics were really, really important, and we kind of sent you off, Morbite, to kind of learn how to do your own metrics and how to do that kind of thing. So now that we're here,
Want me
and that
to,
you've been seeing
go
some
over that?
success, yeah, like what do you do to design metrics for yourself, and what kind of success have you seen?
so. The earliest metric was just how many. Let me just go through my notes here. So my earliest metric had to do with how hard I was being pushed under turret, like with how many waves was I under my turret, and I found that in specific matchups like versus Caitlyn or Draven, I was under my turret like 80-90% of the time, just getting harassed the whole time. So like, kind of like I tried to reduce that and find some way to do that through like, say, maybe I need to push the wave more often. Maybe I need to spend less time looking for harass on them and spend more time trying to position and hit the wave. And what I found was that through knowing that I was pushed under the wave more often than I would like, and just being able to say, if I can at least reduce the number of times I'm under turret and by 10 minutes by 1, then I'll know that I'm doing something different, right? And then it's like, I found that like through just ignoring the enemy AD carry while they're trying to push me in, I can just keep the wave frozen outside my turret and almost never be under turret, just through autoing the wave as much as I possibly can. And then also it led me to finding that like there was a lot of times where I was just standing at the wave not autoing, so then I divided the metric of like the amount of time between each auto attack and reducing that to being as tight as possible. And so like I'm kind of like so it's funny because like the whole goal was like stop myself from going on the turret, but I found like 3 or 4 different ways of doing that through like, oh, I need to auto attack more, I need to position a little bit differently, right?
So,
I need to just not interact with them.
For sure. So you can kind of make metrics as you're on the way to achieving a larger metric, right?
Exactly,
And
right. So like
they kind of
So, like-
onion in, sort of like doing a mental hand history in a lot of ways.
and the way they kind of unfolded is really fluid in that like when something doesn't work and you don't make your metric, it's not like you've failed your goal, because like a metric isn't really a goal, right?
No.
Like it's more of like a statistical analysis of what you're doing, and it's like
Yeah, it's a way to
it's
measure.
like there's no way you can get mad at yourself if you're not statistically matching up, because your goal isn't to just do the thing, right? It's just to check it out first.
Mhm.
And so that was really helpful for me, is that like I don't get nearly as frustrated when I'm not doing as well, because it's like, well, you know, I have more concrete ways of looking at things, you know.
So how did you come to the initial metric of how many waves am I under turret during the laning phase? Like, what prompted you to start there?
So what prompted me to start there was the very first metric, which was, how am I missing so many minions? I was 50 to 60 CS down as Twitch and the Caitlyn matchups every single time, and I had fought like 6 or 7 Caitlyns over the last 2 weeks in ranked, and almost all of them completely booty blasted me, so there was something kind of going on there. And so like the first match, I was like, okay, why am I missing so many CS? So I went through the first game, I was like, tallied of every single missing CS and the reason why, and the overwhelming number of reasons was because I was either dead from being under turret, or just under turret missing them because they were at awkward health. And so like, what happened was like, I was like, okay, how am I missing CS? Okay, they're under turret. Yeah. Now let me think about how often I'm under turret. Okay, now how can I stop being under turret so often?
So you basically started with getting CS is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You just start with like a rule of the game that you're fairly confident in, and then kind of derive downwards from there and say, okay, like how often, you know, how many CS am I missing? Right? I mean, it's like everyone is aware that that is a metric that is extremely relevant for something like a laner, right? So to, you know,
and then like, you know, it's not like other mechanics where it's like sometimes it's actually not a good idea to get CS. Like, no, it's you know, you have to get your CS. It's not like jungler where it's like, oh, I have to gank top 4 times by 10 minutes or we just lose. Like that's how it works every game, right? So it's like with jungler you have to be, I think, more specific about them. But like with laning specifically and things that are going to be the same every game, you can kind of just go through the road. And I'm sure that I could have found different ways to get over there, you know.
So basically what I'm hearing as a strategy from you is start with a basic metric that you're fairly confident that's based on a fundamental rule of the game, right?
That's going to be true 90 to 95% of the time, yeah.
That will be true a good amount of the time. This should be true or, you know, correct 90+% of the time, even if there are exceptions, right? And then from there, create smaller metrics in order to, you know, once you've sort of done some observation and looked at how you're doing on that first metric, you kind of come up with some ideas based around some of the problem points you see, right? And just through observation, you kind of come into, okay, here are the reasons that I'm not meeting this metric, or here are the things that are happening during the times that I'm not meeting this metric, right? And then do a little bit more thinking about, you know, what are some different ways I could solve that, and then come up with several metrics in order to try to reduce that, and then you just kind of keep onioning down, layering down. Does that sound about accurate?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, I wouldn't have found these metrics had I not just like had the initial of like, why am I losing CS? And then it's like, you can basically drill down to more and more specific things until you probably get to the point where you're like, which way am I clicking in reference to every single minion, right? Because that might change something. So it's like,
there's all sorts
that's
of
the
different
thing
things.
that's the thing that I learned the most. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what Jerry Tendler means when he says, hey, you have to like start looking at smaller and smaller details of the game. It's not just about like learning the game and being like, what are the smaller things? It's also about like finding the metric that you can use to improve upon the smaller things. Because without having the metrics, it's like, what are you gonna do, right? Because you're just, for me, it's like I'm just like going through the game thinking I'm gonna click better around minions, but I don't really know what that means. So like when I think I'm clicking better, I feel good, but when I don't think I'm clicking better, I feel bad. But like I don't know what's actually good or bad.
And so coming up with some sort of a metric of how to think about what is a good click, what is a bad click, then allows you to be a lot more objective rather than relying on your gut instinct and your feeling, right? So, you know, obviously I think, you know, CS is an absolutely incredible metric when we start thinking about doing laning. What do we think are some basic metrics that you can start from that would make sense for a jungler? I'll go ahead and toss this one to you, Dilgar. And this doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you're going to have to work from, because obviously you're in purple belt, and so things are, difficult and funky. So I won't necessarily say, this is something you're going to work on for yourself. I'm just saying, as a new jungler coming up, right? What's something that you might suggest as a metric to try to derive downwards from?
It's would probably be the number of times you get a successful gank off. Like, how many times are your ganks successful, and how many times are they not? And,
so gank success rate.
You need to be able to, you'd be able to define success for what success is for each kind of ganks, obviously. Because some ganks, the success is just having the enemy back off the wave.
Right. I mean, there's one game I can think of. Like Dom made a video of where Dom didn't actually gank Shinshin, but like let Shinshin freeze his wave and then just kind of hovered top for a little bit and completely zoned Grigny off for like 4 waves. And like that was kind of like a cool thing to know that like you can do that in Challenger because people actually respect you.
Yeah, right. It's almost like the game is completely different as soon as somebody actually like.
Right, so it's like.
Yeah, that's. Indeed. I think that's a great one. Do you think there are any others that are really good?
I'd say
I would
HP,
say
out of first or second clear. How much HP you still have after your clear?
Right. Yeah. So HP, mana, XP, and shall we say time as well, like game time?
Yeah.
Coming out of first clear, right? And this allows you to start optimizing your clears. As soon as you start trying to maximize those things, you immediately come to, okay, well, like, how can I be higher HP? How can I be higher mana? How can I get more XP? And these sorts of things allow you to then very, very naturally start thinking about pathing, start thinking about kiting camps, all that kind of good stuff.
Then you can use that to like lead you into like, hey, how much time am I spending in between each camp? How much time am I spending with each clear? How much time do I have between each clear? Do I have the maximum amount of time to gank? Like,
yes, it all kind of starts tying together.
Yeah.
And like efficiency, when you think about it, is like this really like cloudy term that like really doesn't seem seems really ambiguous. But like when you start to break it down in the metrics, it's like, oh, I mean, efficiency just means spending the least amount of time clearing, the least amount of time ganking with the most efficient, like the most effectiveness, and it's like and then it starts to like really start to make sense.
Efficiency is just maximizing certain metrics.
Yeah, exactly.
And minimizing others, right? So, yeah. But generally, I would say if people say efficiency is like maximizing your value per time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I tend to say that for League, efficiency is about maximizing your resources gained over time.
And I would say obviously, like as a rule of thumb, resources over time is a really great way to think about it, because especially in early game, you do get there. How many resources you collect is going to determine how quickly you reach a certain point in the game. That being kind of your wake up, right? Which people will talk about as being the moment at which you can kind of stop focusing on collecting resources and start focusing on taking towers.
Denying them, yeah.
Right? Well, maybe denying them, maybe literally winning the game, right? Like taking towers, right?
Well, that's still kind of like denying them. I mean, the whole point of the game is to get so much more stuff than them that they can't stop you, right? That's like kind of like what you have to do.
I fundamentally disagree. The point of the point of the game is to take towers and win the game.
Right, but like it's a lot easier to take the turret if you maximize your resources, isn't it?
But it's not necessary.
Yeah, once you're like, if you have older...
I never said it doesn't have to be necessary.
But that's why I'm saying...
But you're going to maximize your chances of winning, right? So it's like, you're not going to ever get the challenger if you're getting 30 CS a minute at 10, right? Like,
I'm not saying that that it's not a good metric. I'm saying I think there's a better one. And the better one is, like, how many... how do I get as many turrets as fast as possible? Or, like, how do I... not how many do I get as fast as possible, but like there's the whole thing of like there are rules around what you need to do to win the game, involving taking towers and eventually a nexus, right? And like one of the metrics that Cyclone came up with, who by the way, very exciting news, he may actually be able to join us for some of these meetings in the future.
Ooh,
One of the things that he mentioned as a metric that he was really interested in is just like setting the goal of like what is the next turret that my team is going to take, like how can my team play such that they're able to take a turret as quickly as possible, right? And by maximizing that metric, he's actually seen a huge amount of success in his solo students. He talked about like there was a guy I think that he was coaching in gold, and obviously this is anecdotal, right? But he was coaching a guy in gold and mentioned that basically all that he did was told him to just do what he knew and like what he was comfortable with. That was his first piece of advice, right? Which translates into a lot of different stuff, including being patient, including keeping a small champion pool, etc., 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 right? Just like do what you know, and then secondly, start all of your reasoning from how can I, what tower am I going to is my team going to take next, and what is my part of the plan for how to make it happen, right? And the guy immediately just started having huge success, right? And so I think it's something that's kind of worth thinking about, is like, something to do with taking towers as a metric seems like, in a lot of ways, like how could it be wrong as a measure of success? You know what I mean? It's like the reason we gain resources is so that we can take towers, right? And so in some ways, the ultimate measure of success is the ability to take towers, right? And
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Although I would argue that taking turrets is a function of how much resources you have, right? Because if I'm just sitting at my fountain and never get EXP or gold, I'm never going to be able to take those turrets. And you know that to be true because of the fact that I'm still level 1, right? So it's like if you say that League is a function of turrets that you take, then what comes out of that is resource management and the effective use of resources where you put them on the map. Right, so
the point of Atherton is that at some point, getting more resources will not mean you get more towers, or you get towers faster. Once you reach a certain threshold after which you can stop taking towers, then there's no point in getting more resources.
And
You're
in fact,
better off.
Yeah, focusing.
Well,
on
I don't
getting
know if I also
resources
agree with that
is
because
going
they're going to be
hard.
getting resources too.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you're ending the game.
The good news too is that you can actually, in a lot of ways, it's not that you completely stop caring about collecting resources. It's that you shift the priority, right? Getting resources is still important. It's just less important than taking towers and getting tower damage, right? A great example of this is pushing, right? When you are, or like wave manipulation in general, right? In the early game, it makes a lot of sense in some situations to freeze the wave or to slow push the wave or do all sorts of stuff, right? But as you get into the mid and late game, what you'll see most players do, and I don't think it's wrong, is immediately start to just push as hard as they can in every lane, in every situation. And the reason that that's the case is, right, when you push, that's how you generate tempo, right? You pushing the wave into the tower is a threat. It's like check in chess, right? You're saying like, I will literally take your tower if you don't sit here and defend it, right? And when they then have to sit there and defend it, it gives you a certain amount of time that you're then able to go out onto the map, establish vision, take objectives, gain positional advantages around those objectives, all sorts of different good stuff, right? But it all comes back to pushing, right? But not only is pushing good because it gives you those tempo advantages, it's also good because it gets you the most amount of resources as quickly as you possibly can, right? You gain your resources in your lane, and then you go off and you do something, then you come back to the lane, you gain some more resources, and you get back into the, it's like, being able to shove quickly allows you to maximize your resource gain while also doing all sorts of other different stuff, right? And at some point, setting up vision around the objective becomes more important than catching the wave at the turn.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you're ahead of them and you're killing them and taking their stuff, they're not going to be able to get as much stuff, so the rate you're getting stuff is still higher than them, even if it's lower, right? So that's totally fine.
And I would
But
argue,
I
if
don't-
you have enough of a resource lead to the point where if both of you collect resources at the same rate, you end the
Right.
game before they come online and can actually contest you, then you don't need to worry about resources.
And I wasn't saying that. It just sounded like you guys were completely discounting. Oh, resources don't matter. We'll just take turrets, forehead. Like that
No.
doesn't really.
No, of course not. Of course not. Resources are, if you can't take turrets, the way that you become able to take turrets is by collecting resources. I think that's
Right.
very, very clear, right? But what I'm saying is by having turrets be the ultimate metric and having resources be the secondary metric, it naturally creates the transition point. Whereas if you say resources are the ultimate goal of the game and amassing them is like the goal, right? Then it becomes much more unclear. Like, when do I stop collecting resources and start trying to take towers? Are towers a resource? Like, how does it all work, right? And like, you can argue that towers are a resource, right? And that you can trade them for other things and all of that. But in the end, right? They are the ultimate resource, right? If you lose all of your towers, you lose, and then the Nexus, you lose the game. Likewise, if you
Indeed.
get all of the enemy towers
And obviously-
and take the Nexus, you win.
Obviously, the ultimate goal of the game is to take their
Yeah.
structures. And the easiest way to take their structures is to have more stuff than them, so
Yes.
that they can't stop you. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes.
Yes.
And so, like, yes, obviously, the turrets are going to be your first, most important thing. But just the way it came off to me sounded like you guys were just like, "Oh no, turrets are the only thing."
Definitely,
that's my
definitely not trying to imply that at all.
No, definitely not. Yeah, the big thing is that when you say denying stuff is more important, it's one of the common ways to deny stuff is to just freeze the waves, like closer to you, but that's like that's.
Well, that's really only
gives you
early
more
lane
resources.
stuff,
Yeah,
right?
and
No,
it
like,
is
you can
only
freeze
real
really
stuff.
late. Like you can freeze in the mid game really hard.
You can, yeah, but in most cases it's not.
LS is all about freezing behind Gromp and.
Well, like, cause like I know I freeze in the middle game sometimes if I'm like, oh, I'm 50 CS down and the turret waves up in front of my second turret, I'm just gonna freeze for a minute and gain 30 CS, right? So it's like
Sure.
it's okay
but
sometimes, but like but if you have to do that, then it's like you're giving up your whole tempo lead or anything like that. You can't do anything
you
for the
are-
next 3 minutes.
You
So.
are denying resources.
Right.
Yeah. You're trading tempo for more of a resource lead, right?
Mhm.
And usually, because in the current meta of League of Legends, most champions' wake-ups are somewhere between 2 and 3 items. By the time it's mid-game and you're hitting that 15-20 minute mark, and most people have like 1.5, 2 items, right? The denying of the resources ends up, just kind of coincidentally because of the way that the game is balanced, being not as important as the tempo, because everyone is
Right.
an actual tower threat at that point. And so,
Right, because I mean,
Yeah.
freezing isn't the only way to deny too, right? Because if you have so much tempo that you can rotate, because I mean, obviously, the closer you are to ending the game, the closer you are, the less space you have to rotate, right?
Mhm.
So, faster you can rotate, the more they deny, because they have to stop taking that wave, or they're gonna take your turret, right? So it's like, either way, you're still denying stuff. It's just kind of like, how are
Yeah.
you doing it?
And so if you can deny resources while pushing, if you can deny resources while taking towers, that's almost always going to be better than denying resources through freezing. Does that sound right?
95 plus, yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agreed. The only situations is like, for me specifically as a hyper carry, that I need my items and I'm really far behind because
you're
something
one of the
shitty happened
exceptions,
in lane.
right? And if you don't have your item spike, then it's like this weird unequal goals thing where you're still trying to collect resources because your champion isn't online yet. Everyone else is online and they're trying to start winning the game, right? It's like
Right. So I
and
found
you get
kind of like
really
a mix
wonky
of,
stuff happening there. Yeah.
I found like a mix of strategies that kind of like, I push, but not so fast. I don't hard shove. I just kind of last hit until like the next wave
Yeah.
collapses, and then I hard shove, right? So I get
Yeah, you slow
12
push.
to 18 minutes,
Mhm.
then 12 to 18 minions, and then I can go and try to be there for fights, because
Yeah.
even if I'm weaker, having my 1500 HP added to the team fight HP
Mhm.
pool is still really important.
And I would contrast that with the idea of thinning out a minion wave and letting the minion wave be so large that you're able to stay there indefinitely, or that the wave position is frozen, right?
Mhm.
I think slow pushing in mid-game is amazing, especially if you really do need to collect resources and you want to do it safely, because it allows you to collect the most number of resources while in the safest position that you possibly can be for the longest period of time. So you maximize your safe resource gain by slow pushing. But actual freezing in the mid game by setting up a wave position that doesn't move and then like sitting there and collecting resources from it, sort of by definition requires your team to be so far ahead that they can defend the other two turrets that are ostensibly, still alive in other lanes 4v5, right? Because if you're freezing, then assumably no one is there stopping you, right?
Right.
So, if you're that far ahead that your team can 4v5, would it not usually be better to just shove and apply pressure and then like start to try to win a fight somewhere? It's like it ends up being the case that's sort of how it works out. And I think that's also a function of how tanky turrets are, right? If turrets were really tanky and they were difficult to take, then the reward for pushing would be a lot less, right? But because they've become so paper thin, especially once you have like 1.5, 2 items, if you get a double stacked wave and you're hitting it for like 10 seconds, it's dead, right? And it's like the game. It's these strategies are like we're saying, right? Like the fact that freezing isn't good mid game is more a function of balance than it is a function of like the design of the game.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It makes sense too, because freezing is all about making sure the wave's on your side. But like, if the game is such that turret to paper thin, having the wave on your side is so much more dangerous because they can just come and take your turret while you're trying to freeze.
Exactly. That too.
So it's like, and it also is like, freezing mid game used to be really strong back in the earlier seasons when games did go 40, 50 minutes commonly. So it's like, it makes
100%.
sense, really.
Yeah. And as they've continued to consciously, as designers, speed up the pace of the game so that more people can get more games in and they get more cash from more people playing because they can get more skins, right? Like they have a vested interest in keeping.
But it's also like, the gaming climate 10 years ago is a lot different than now. Nowadays, people prefer the quick games, right?
Yes.
Back then, people were like, "Oh, dude, I can play a game for an hour. That's so cool." And now it's like, "Dude, I have to play a game for 20 minutes. What the hell, Riot?"
Exactly. So, it's something that I don't see changing in the future. Likely.
No, Riot's been doubling down on the aggressive early meta, and I love it. I mean, even watching pro games has been super cool because it's like.
Oh, yeah. It was absolutely terrible having no first block by 20 minutes, like having just the lane swap meta.
Oh yeah, or like losing, or trading 2 fucking turrets by like 9 minutes, 4-1.
Yeah.
4-1-0. Like why? Why is that even a thing?
XD. For sure.
Good times.
Yeah.
The fucking double jungle meta was.
Oh my god, the double jungle funnel? Or was it the funnel mid?
That was pretty boring. When the top laners were not allowed to lane and they had to fucking follow the jungler around.
Oh, during the lane swap meta?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was dumb as hell. And then also, like, the funnel mid strategy was stupid as hell, too.
Mm-hmm.
This one wasn't that stupid, but...
You're a jungler, of course you like funnel.
No, because you don't get to do that. In solo queue, that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. I actually played against the funnel comp yesterday, and we won because the funnel comp basically was 2v5, and then the other 3 just stopped doing their own thing, so they just actually never grouped, and we were just like, alright, whatever then.
No,
I don't know.
In solo queue is super hard. Funneling in general is actually super hard. If not properly, it's super strong. But it is extremely hard.
But yeah, I mean... It's just kind of interesting to see, how deep you can kind of go.
Agreed. So, with that said, to return to the text, right? After that lovely discussion of metrics, the majority of the chapter this week focused on London taxicab drivers, right? It was stressed that London taxicab drivers have some of the most impressive memory and navigational skills in the world as a result of mastering what the London Transit Service calls the knowledge. That is to say, the streets in London are not gridded. There's a ton of bridges over the Thames, and it's just genuinely very difficult to understand what the quickest route from A to B is. And so London taxi drivers spend a ton of time figuring out different routes from to how to navigate from place A to place B. But not only that, they memorize a lot of details about different places so that taxi riders can be very vague about, oh yeah, can you take me to that one hat shop next to the cupcake place, somewhere over near Charing Cross? And they're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And they get you there, right? So they memorize a lot of details about different locations, and they memorize a lot of routing information about how to get from one place to another, so as to be able to be the best taxi drivers that they can be in a horribly designed city from a city planning perspective. So
Actually true.
yeah, right. It's impressive stuff, right? So they were studied extensively by Eleanor Maguire, a neuroscientist at University College London. In 2000, she did a study based on some MRIs, 16 taxi drivers, 50 non-taxi drivers, and she examined the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain associated with memory, especially spatial and navigational memory, which she supposed would be the part of the brain most active, given the strains of their particular job. She found that the hippocampus is distinctly larger in London cabbies, proportional to the time spent as a cabbie. She then did a later study where she compared the brains of taxi drivers versus bus drivers, hypothesizing that the hippocampus would be larger in taxi drivers, but not as much in bus drivers, because the bus drivers drive a route that is set, and they don't need to do the navigational stuff, even though they are still both driving, right? Study was confirmed. Hippocampus larger in taxi drivers, not as large in bus drivers. Further, there was a study in 2011, which kind of seals the deal, right? 79 prospective cabbies who are not yet actual licensed taxi drivers, and 31 regular Joes took scans at one point, and then 4 years later, they took scans again. About half of the prospective cabbies had made it all the way to getting licensed, and they had the observed larger hippocampi at that point. And the others, who either dropped out or flunked, looked the exact same as the control group, who never actually made it. So this kind of implies that learning the abilities required by a licensed taxi driver makes your brain big. This is the idea.
Part of your brain.
Yeah. And notably, something that it doesn't necessarily imply is that everyone has the capability to do it, right? Not necessarily everyone has the only about half of the people who tried to become cabbies were able to become cabbies, right? And if we believe the rest of the book, then we would probably say that this is because their practice was subpar, right? That would be the conclusion that the author would like us to come to. But it's important to note that it also could be the result of some kind of talent, right? We haven't necessarily seen evidence thus far, as far as I can see, that says that that there's no amount of genetic something or other that will limit one's ability to learn certain activities. In fact, neuroplasticity is an idea, kind of supports the idea, and although we did see that in the example of perfect pitch, everyone was able to learn it as long as they were trained early enough. There's nothing to suggest that this is true for all skills, right? And it may be that there may be some skills that one does need talent to excel in or something like that. So, again, not necessarily saying that this is my position, but I'm just saying we haven't seen evidence for it yet. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So, do we have any thoughts about these studies and how they might relate to,
I think that the most craziest part about that study is that they also, at some point, extended it to retired cab drivers, and like
Right. Yeah.
showed that their brains actually got smaller after like, but like not so much that you'd expect, right? It's like it was still there, but like, you know,
But reduced,
if
yeah.
it's been disuse, it goes away, but not nearly as fast as kind of like people would expect, I think.
Yeah, I
It
think
doesn't disappear.
these studies they like show that if you constantly work on something and you constantly try to improve on one skill, you'll eventually gain so much knowledge about the skill that you just become good at it over time.
Yeah. You not only do you actually get, not only do you learn more about the skill, your brain actually makes you better at performing the skill by repurposing neurons that would be used for other stuff. That's kind of the whole next
And then
spot.
and on the other hand, though, if you don't do that skill anymore and start learning other stuff, some of those neurons will be repurposed, and it kind of like
Mhm.
So you kind of have to be a little careful if you're kind of looking to stay good at the thing for
Yes.
however long.
And on
See, a very good example
Mhm.
is like
Go for it.
going to space, for example, where people don't use muscles anymore. They come to Earth and they can't walk anymore. Like it's the same principle.
And this reminds me a lot of, people talk about like mechanics and damage foresight and how that atrophies super quickly, right? Not only in League, but you also have the analog of like StarCraft, right? If you don't upkeep your mechanics, if you don't practice like daily, then in a couple of weeks you can lose a lot of what you have. You know what I mean? And so it kind of suggests that playing League is, in a lot of ways, there's like a minimum time commitment. You know what I mean? If you want to achieve like a certain level of success, right? And if you don't practice frequently enough, then you essentially can't push out of homeostasis with mechanics, or you don't push out of homeostasis often enough, and you don't get to the point where you're able to do it. Like practicing 1 day a week for 10 years is not the same as practicing, every day for like 4 years.
2 days. Yeah.
Right, and the idea of like spaced repetitions and other aspects of learning really kind of corroborate that theory that like the way we learn best is through making connections with other things we know, so that we can have more solid connections, but also like repeating everything over and over again, with more time in between if necessary. Depending on how things go, to really help you solidify those things and make their neural connections faster. Even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's true, right? Because it really kind of is all about that like myelination, right? It's about going from conscious competence to unconscious competence, right? Learning something so well that you can do it automatically.
It's
If
like
you don't
being,
get there with your mechanics, good
it's like being
luck.
right-handed,
Yeah,
for example.
Yeah,
Because
it's-
you constantly use your right arm to do everything. You
Yeah,
eventually
exactly.
don't even need to think about it.
and it's I'm sure we've all experienced the feeling of like coming back after like a 2-week vacation or something and loading up League again and being like, wait a second, I feel like I have 2 left hands now, right? Like
Yeah.
you just like nothing works.
Or even
right?
sometimes for some weird reason, the time away will like let it simmer in there somehow, and then you'll be better.
I haven't experienced better at mechanics. I have experienced better at mental game, but
Yeah.
I attribute
Same.
that mostly to the to the idea that Jared Tendler talks about of like accumulated emotion, right? If you are having an accumulated emotion problem, perhaps one that you aren't even consciously aware of, right? Taking a break and then coming back might allow your emotional stomach to do some digestion that it had been meaning to get around to, right? And so when you come back, you have a more positive mindset, and there's no accumulation there, and so you're able to play at a higher level than you were when you left, simply because you don't have that accumulation anymore, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of my theory about a lot of
I can see
the
that.
benefit of breaks. I have not ever come back from a break and found my hands better.
I have, but maybe that's just because like I spend so much time, doing things with my hands, micro movements and stuff. So maybe that. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. That happened.
Maybe it's just that like
taking a break. Like I hadn't played the game in like 3 or 4 months, and I came back and I was better at it.
I think it's just because of changing environment. So it's like if you sit in your room for years, your brain will get really used to it, and it doesn't function properly. It's like it still functions properly, obviously, but it doesn't function as well because there's less change. So there's less processing involved in your brain. But if you have a change of environment, so if you have a change in environment, your brain starts to focus on more things. It starts to basically, how do I say this?
Go stir crazy?
Yeah, something like that. So it just starts basically self-evolving in a way.
And it kind of just reminded me of the idea of muscle atrophy, where like if you literally don't walk for like 30 years, or like you're up in outer space where gravity doesn't have the same effect on you, your muscles will actually just like melt away, like not literally melt away, but and then it's kind of like the same thing for your brain, except it's not like you're losing neurons or brain cells, you're losing myelination. So it's kind of cool, it's kind of cool to see the analog there.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
So, in terms of mechanical delay, or mechanical decay, right? Does anybody know if there's been any research done on, like, or even just anecdotal experience, right? On, like, sort of, like, related skills, or, like, transfer skills, right? Like, can you, in some ways, upkeep your mechanics at League by playing a ton of OS, right? Like, is that a thing, right? Do you come back less bad than you would be if you just didn't do anything after the break, or during the break?
I think that was the case for me at one point, because I played EVE Online before, and it's similar to StarCraft, where you have to use your keyboard a lot.
Sure.
And when you use your keyboard a lot, you basically learn how to use abilities in separate ways at the same time, but like in different orders, and that basically underlines the ability of mechanics in League. And when I first started League, I found it very easy to, and from Gatune, for example, I found it easy to do Q, E, Alt, and W instantly, but in correct order.
Well, that makes sense to me. It's like, because the skill there isn't knowing, knowing that you have to press Q, W, E, and R in a specific order. The skill is the ability to, have the dexterity to do that, which takes the time. Yeah. And so it's like you're going from you're basically going from a situation where you're lifting 150 pounds to like lifting 50 pounds, right? And it's like, even though I've never lifted this kind of weight before, it's much different in terms of everything. It's still going to be a lot easier for you just because like you have the experience from the other kinds of things you've done. It makes sense to me. The one thing I would say that it's probably much more difficult for the mouse specifically, because the way you have to use your mouse in League or first-person shooters is a lot different than, say, OS or a puzzle game or whatever. But with the keyboard specifically, I think it's not so much about what buttons you have to press, but rather like your ability to, use your hand tendons effectively to do it.
And some part of that is obviously the strength of the tendons, and some part of that is clearly like the brain's how fine the brain's control over the tendons is, right? They talk a lot about that sort of thing as well, and how maybe we just ought to get to that point, huh? Yeah. So the next couple of pages of the chapter talk a lot about the adaptability of the brain and the adaptability of the body in general, right? He gave several more examples of physical sports having records being broken by absolutely hysterical margins, far and above what any quote-unquote normal person is able to do. It's like, talked about the push-up record, right? And it's like, most people, if they're very fit, can do something like, 50 push-ups, right? And then you look at the world record, it's something like, 5 40,000 push-ups in like 24 hours with like with like a little bit of resting or something like that, right? It's like, Jesus, dude, like what? Oh my god, right? Like, you know, you get some like absolutely astounding physical records, right? As a result of people doing absolutely stupid amounts of practice on single skills, right? He also talked quite a bit about vision, right? He talked about blind people and how they end up, in a lot of cases, rewiring their visual cortex to more carefully interpret sensation from their fingertips in order to assist in reading Braille. There was a 1990s study that showed that like repurposing and growth combined to make regions that were related to fingertip touch overlap in Braille instructors. And this resulted in that they had extremely increased sensitivity to stimulus in those fingertips, but they actually had more trouble than the average person telling which exact finger the stimulus had occurred to. They could feel a much finer poke, but they couldn't tell you where exactly it was. The relevant quote here is something to the effect of, "These studies tell us that the brain structure and function are not fixed. They change in response to use. It is possible to shape the brain, your brain, my brain, anybody's brain, in the ways that we desire through conscious, deliberate training." I think this is very interesting, right? And I wonder if any of you have ever experienced anything that might seem adjacent to this, right? What do we imagine getting good at League of Legends requires, right? What areas of the brain do we imagine that would use, if we even know any, right? And then have we noticed that skills in potentially related areas have gotten like significantly worse than the average person? What do we think the average good League of Legends player is worse at compared to the average person?
Exercise.
Being a functional human being in society.
Dang, you right?
No.
So what
Yeah,
does that
the
have
part of the brain that
Check it out,
governs
check it
being a functional human brain, functional human just isn't there in a League player. That's not how it works.
Realistically, though, I actually think there's like maybe something to that. You know what I mean? It's like if all of one's efforts and motivations are spent on League, right? What's left for the rest of your life? You know what I mean? Like it's an all-consuming pursuit for a lot of people. And so, you know, maybe the areas of the brain having to do with like motivation and impulse control, they're getting like so good at sustaining practice on League of Legends and building, you know, impulses to do very quick reactions in real time to, you know, different stuff. Like if we're gaining skill at that, maybe we're losing skill at, I don't know, motivating ourselves to get up in the morning,
That's called
go
addiction.
to work. You know what
I kind of disagree with that. I think that if you have the motivation and the discipline to do something that's all encompassing, like getting better at tennis or getting better at League, the things that you do will be in service of that, right? So like, hey, if I don't work to make money to be in my house, I have electricity, you know, come home and play the game, then I'm not gonna be able to play the game, so I'm gonna go do that, right?
Sure.
So it's not like they're gonna go to work because they want to work and get money to pay their bills or whatever. They're doing that so that they can do that and practice the game more. So it's like,
Mhm.
you know, maybe it's not that they're not functional. Maybe it's that their passion is so strong that it drives them to do other things that are in service of those values.
Certainly, I think that could be the case.
And there's like another point of view there. So if someone likes League so much, they're just gonna hate going to work at some point. They'll completely despise it, and at some point they're just gonna quit their job for League, something like that.
Mhm.
Because if you're so
Which-
passionate about League, you're wasting time on working. and I think that's how the mindset will be.
Which is,
Certainly,
I
I've
mean,
experienced
could be
that.
true. But I think that most people, if they have no other choices, other than like working that job and being unhappy while doing it, be in service of what they need to do to be able to be happy. Otherwise, it's hard, right? So it's like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, though, I think in a lot of cases you actually get transfer learning, right? It's like honestly, maybe this question was ill-formed, right? Like, if we don't actually know what areas of the brain are affected by playing League, then it seems...
Well, I can tell you some, probably.
Sure.
For me specifically, I know that I'm a lot better at certain executive functions because I play League. So, like, the frontal lobe is affected. Like, you guys know that I have ADHD and struggle with that sort of thing. But, like, playing League, it's a detail-oriented game and such that, like, you have to be able to, you have to be able to do that, right? There's just no choice. And so, like,
fine motor control over the hand is probably similar, like you see in musicians, which he talks about.
Right, and so, like, yeah, for me too, that's definitely been the thing. I know that's helped me a lot. But on top of that too, like your vision, part of the brain, the occipital lobe that controls vision. You have to be able to see and discern details and have fine control over your eyes. So, like, and you have to be able to. There's not as many macro movements, but depending on how fast your mouse moves, you have to be able to do bigger movements with your arms, bigger movement with your head. So, like, I think League actually does use a lot more of the brain than we think.
Probably.
Oh no, I'm convinced it uses a lot. There are many, many, many different skills and parts of the brain that are used by League, because it's mechanical and very cerebral game to play.
I completely agree.
I think a big part of not only League, but just game in general, is reaction times. It's like, I know I researched some studies on projects in school, and the average reaction time of gamers is much, much higher than average reaction time of normal people. Well, normal.
Well, that's actually haven't been completely proven. I know that there's been surveys on Reddit and stuff, of which obviously, sample size or whatever, but,
not to mention,
showing that, like,
sampling biases. Jeez.
But, like, if you take the analog, it seems like it has pretty much the same bell curve, and it doesn't even seem like reaction time has a function to do with rank either. It seems like more like reaction time is more of a function of what you know rather than what you see for most people.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have a much higher chance. You're gonna have a much higher chance of flashing that Lux Q if you know the Lux Q is coming, from the fog, rather than if you have no idea that you even have what a Lux Q is. There's literally no chance.
Yeah, but reaction time is completely different from just analyzing the scenario in game. They're not connected to each other whatsoever. Reaction time helps you.
Of course they are.
But they're not directly connected. It's like, if you
they
know
are.
how to analyze the game, you have no reaction time.
Describe exactly what you mean by reaction time. Do you mean the gap between a stimulus and a response? Or do you mean how quickly somebody can react to a response?
The gap between the stimulus and the response. So it's like, if something happens on your screen, for some people it might take longer for them to realize what happened.
Sure.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So it doesn't matter what happens on your screen.
So the thing that the research shows with that is that there's kind of two distinct categories of reaction time, right? There's primed and unprimed reaction time, right? If you know something is coming, how fast can you react to it? Versus if you don't know that it's coming and it's just being thrown at you from some random place that you didn't expect, right? And the finding is that variances between primed and unprimed reaction are much larger than variances from person to person between primed reaction times or unprimed reaction times, right? And if you want to actually measure reaction time, you got to be careful not to compare apples to oranges, right? And what you will often see is that good players are able to react as quickly as they are because they are using primed reactions, not because their base reaction speed is so much more incredibly good. It's not that they also didn't see it coming and they were just faster than you. It's that they saw it coming, right? and that's kind of what I believe everyone else was trying to say as well. There was like a study done, actually, very informally, that I think Moribite, you linked it to me. It was done on some of the members of Curse, I want to say, and a bunch of other random.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. Yeah,
in like a game lab, right? And they actually did several reaction speed tests that are, were widely used at the time. And they measured like some of the members of Curse and, like we say, some of the members of the other people, and they did like a plot of like rank versus reaction speed, right? And they found almost no correlation. In fact, they saw a slight negative correlation. The higher rank you were, the less likely you were to have a good reaction speed, which obviously makes no sense and goes completely against the hypothesis that having a good reaction speed is a factor in
but then
getting higher rank.
Later on in that video, they also did a part of the study where they kind of looked at like, how are these people using their eyes and looking at the screen, and you can kind of see that like the Diamond 3 player, he was really good, right? He's still really good, but he still like spent more than a second on each second of this part of the screen. But like you look at Voivoy's screen while he's playing AD carry in that game, and his screen, literally you couldn't even tell that he was looking at a certain part of the screen for more than a half a second before he moved his eyes. So he was constantly taking in information all over the place. And so it's like, when you have that much information coming in and you're able to parse it all completely, it's almost like the need for actual gut reaction goes down significantly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. If he just knows what's all the possibilities are going to be, and he's able to parse the information, he doesn't need to react. He can predict everything.
Yeah. And
I remember like a few years ago, Pobelter talking about like saying, I have shit reaction time, but I just predict everything.
Yep.
And
I think it was Pobelter who said that or something. I don't remember.
Yes,
and,
Pobelter.
I mean, I know Obsessions has said that before, especially before she started working on her like vision and camera control habits, right? So it definitely seems to me like vision skills and the ability to perceive faster is a lot more or not necessarily perceive faster, but perceive more, right? Tends to actually outweigh the usefulness of perceiving faster, right?
Yeah.
And again, like priming versus not priming, actually predicting that stuff will occur and having the foresight and the mental space available to do those predictions makes a much larger difference than base reaction speed.
Now, there are going to be cases where you have to do base reaction speed, like, oh, hey, look, a Malphite that you have no idea was there comes out of a bush and ults you, and you flash it. Like,
yeah.
There's no planning there. You literally just saw the thing coming at you and you flash. Right? So that does happen. That does.
100%.
Yep.
But if it's not super common.
Yeah, and those situations are relatively rare, and like whether you're good enough to do it or not, in the end, I almost want to say it like kind of doesn't even matter, because you should have been able to predict that it was coming anyway. You know what I mean? It's like that's how you solve the problem. You don't solve the problem by becoming a lower reaction speed person. You solve the problem by being able to predict that a Malphite could be there.
Mm-hmm.
I think I disagree on that point, because League is such a game with so many different outcomes and so many unexpected things that base reaction is important. Because, like, let's say champion's out of meta and the team picks that champion.
Sure.
You have no idea what it does. And as a pro, you should be able to react to what the champion does, even if you don't know, like, the champion perfectly.
You could also figure that out by just being familiar with every champion in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was.
I mean, even when it's new, right? Like,
you can just take every game. Like, there's a finite number of champions, and what they do is like strictly set, but you can actually expect everything that's going to happen.
I imagine that every pro has spent at least a couple hours in, well, maybe not every pro, but I imagine a lot of pros have spent at least a couple hours in Practice Tool on basically every champion in the game, and every pro definitely has seen every champion in the game played hundreds of times, right? To the point where they are able to have enough of a basic understanding of the particle speeds and ranges and everything that as they continue to play, they can make reasonable decisions around it, right? No, they're not going to be able to, tether like Volibear chain stun from 10 range, like obviously not, right? Like, things that they're less familiar with, they're going to struggle more with. But in terms of having a basic understanding that will allow them to kind of get by, almost every pro has it in spades.
And I don't know if you've ever seen a pro play while a new champion comes out. Like, they hard defeat a couple of times before they're like, oh, okay, I see how that works.
Yeah.
And you see that with a lot of new champions. I've seen that with Silas. I've seen that with Kiana. I've seen that with Zoe. Zoe was a little bit more extreme because she's had such a different play pattern. It was really hard to get used to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it definitely does happen where pros just like don't know what the hell to expect and they just hard feed in solo queue. But that's why they practice in solo queue and not on stage, right?
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
But you're right in
base
that,
reaction speed doesn't matter as much. It's because it's very easy, especially if you're a pro player and you have like your teammates as resources and your coach as a resource, to set up a position where you become comfortable with the thing instead of getting better at being uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Okay. I think what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you that reaction time doesn't matter as much as the other reaction time. I forgot what it's called.
Primed reaction.
Prime reaction. But I think it still matters enough for it not to be disregarded. Because, like,
I don't think we were trying to disregard it.
No, I think I was definitely trying to say that it was not important enough to be disregarded, or not important enough to disregard it. I don't think that it matters, basically.
Yeah,
so,
I think it doesn't. You could beat the guy with the best reaction time in the world against the guy with the worst reaction time in the world, and it's not the reaction time that's going to make the difference.
But you can in some situations, and it's still important.
I will cede to you in some situations it does matter, yes. But are the number of situations is that number large enough that it makes any kind of a dent in somebody's win rate? No.
But if you
fractions of percents.
If you're a pro in a game on stage and you lose a fight because you don't have enough reaction time, like base reaction time, that's still a problem because you lost that game because you didn't have base reaction time at that time.
Well,
there were almost certainly 100 other things that they could have changed to never be put in that situation in the first place, and those are a much more effective thing to focus on than the base reaction speed because they tend to be a lot easier to work on.
I think that also base reaction speeds are have a lot of importance put on them. People talk all the time like, oh, people don't like having pros in the league because their base reaction time goes out the window once they get 22 or older. And then you go watch CS:GO pros and they're 35 and still winning worlds, right? So it's like, and first person shooters by virtue require much more reaction speeds and thinking on the fly than League does, in the fact that they're so much more faster paced, especially with CS:GO. And somehow, people that are supposed to have really bad reaction times because they're older are still winning. So it's like, what's the difference there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's not worth looking at. I think it's still important to have very good base reaction time because in scenarios that you didn't prepare for, it can pay off a lot. And in scenarios you didn't expect.
The number of situations that a pro doesn't expect is so few that it doesn't end up mattering.
That's kind of the situation I feel like too. It's like, it's like you have so many situations banked up that it's like, you're gonna expect things, right? So like I mean, have you ever outside of like Tarzan or some guy with really bad mental issues, like you never see them being like, holy shit, like I almost didn't expect that. Like maybe when it comes like damage foresight or something, but like that's a skill that you have to constantly refine. But like with other things, it's almost like they always know exactly what they did wrong, even when they're like, oh, Malphite flashed me in the bush, I should have had a ward there, or I should have had a ward on the other side, or I should have been playing on the other side of the map. It's never, oh, I needed to react faster. You know what I mean? But in a situation where you're not a pro,
focusing on it though doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have it, right? That said though, I don't know.
I think that is more important with lower level players probably who don't necessarily have all the experiences,
For sure.
right?
I can definitely agree with that. If you take somebody who has a lower base reaction speed and you put them against a player of similar skill that also has low base reaction speed, and both of them are fairly new to the game, and there are a lot of things that they don't understand, I definitely think that the person with the better base reaction speed would show at least like a noticeable difference. Maybe not enough to make a dent in the win rate. Maybe it's like a 1%, 2% kind of thing, and so conflating factors are going to delete it before it ever sees the light of day, because by the time you get enough sample size to be able to measure it, they've already like gotten better. You know what I mean? So it's like, yikes.
Okay.
But definitely, I could say theoretically I could see that happening. But as you get more and more situations become familiar, I think that the number of novel situations where reaction speed ends up mattering is just so small that it ends up not mattering. As
Okay, what about
increase mastery?
so it's like if you want to counter a decision, you need to have relevant information to counter that decision and to execute that decision as well. But that decision comes from information gathering, and information gathering comes from you looking at the screen and reacting to what's on the screen, right?
Well, that's different though.
I don't think that's how information
When we think of reaction times, we're talking about stuff like, oh, Malphite just flashed you from the bush. You gonna flash in time in that quarter of a second?
No, but that's
Whereas,
still the
like-
same reaction time you're using. It's the same ability
So-
that you have.
So you're saying that like somebody who looks at something and is able to decipher it in 100 milliseconds, which is a better reaction time than somebody who has 200 millisecond reaction time, is always going to have a better chance of winning because they see the information and parse it faster.
It could matter on the micro level. So, for example, in league and skirmishes, if someone has if someone can execute an ability faster than another person, just because they react to the situation faster, they're more likely to win the fight because they have first strike advantage on like a micro level.
Well,
I'm not
Yeah,
thinking
not
that that's reaction time though. That's different though. That's like being able to look at something and gain, you know, as much information out of it as possible. But reaction is, I see something, I do something. But like, you aren't always doing something after you get a piece of information. You have to be able to sort that information out, take it in, and then once you see an opening, then you take it, which is not really reaction time as much as it is planning ahead.
Yeah, processing speed.
Yep.
And like, when we think about like how does one get faster at processing information, right? It's a matter of practice, and like processing speed is not the same thing as reaction speed, right? Like getting to the point where you are able to immediately make a decision, right? Like I don't know what's like a good one as an example, but let's say you're working on your trading, right? And somebody steps like a toe too far forward, right? You need to be able to perceive and decide that they have made a mistake before the mistake is gone and they've already walked back, right? And there's a certain amount of reaction time involved there, but it's like the reaction time is the gap between the screen showing you that they walked forward and you perceiving that they walked forward. There is then a second gap between you perceiving that they walked forward and you coming to the decision to actually punish them and then do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I would call processing speed, not reaction speed. Do you get what I'm saying?
That's the second gap. The first gap is reaction speed.
Yeah, the first gap is reaction speed, right?
But wouldn't that matter as well? So it's
Yes,
like,
they would both
even if you
matter,
have
but I would
reaction
argue
time-
that processing gap is usually like several orders of magnitude larger than reaction speed gap.
But you still want to minimize both gaps.
If
Or
what you're trying
more-
to do is minimize the amount of time between the screen displaying to you the information and you reacting to that information, you actually doing an action, both gaps are there back to back. And improving either one is going to improve your quote-unquote response time, right? So the idea is that it is much easier to improve your processing speed than it is to improve your reaction speed. Your reaction speed also is a much, the reaction gap is a much smaller gap in all people than the processing gap is, right? Think about the first time that you saw like a trade and then realized how, that you could punish it, right? Like, it might take up to like 5 seconds, right? Like, the gap between a novice and a pro in terms of like, where is the reaction speed coming from? Eliminating 5 seconds out of the processing gap is a much, 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 much bigger difference than somebody naturally being a couple of milliseconds faster in their reaction time.
I guess I'm just thinking a step ahead. It's like, once you do polish your response time, then you can move on to reaction speed to cut it even more.
Yeah. And at that point, if both people were equal in processing speed, then yes, reaction time would be the determining factor. But because League is such a complex game and there are so many different decisions and so many different things to improve your processing speed on, not to mention literally just coming to the correct conclusion in the first place, I don't think that the game has progressed to the point where reaction speed is determining who actually does well and who doesn't do well as a pro. Decision-making ability and processing speed are right now the things that are determining who actually performs well and who doesn't. And reaction speed has almost no, proportionally has almost no effect because the other gaps are so much larger and so much more difficult to overcome.
Well, I'm assuming there will be a point in future where it does counter reaction speed.
There might be a point, but keep in mind, League is a game that changes constantly, right? And so the processing gap is something that can't really ever be closed because you have to constantly program and reprogram all of your reactions based on, however many champions are in the game, times however many balance changes are in the game, times however much time you have to actually acclimate to that new patch, right? So is it ever going to become efficient to work on reaction speed over all of the other things that are involved in playing the game well? Probably not. I don't see it ever happening.
I also think that we can, really tighten reaction speed without improving reaction speed itself, but learning, how to basically process things faster. Because what's going to happen is that, like, your reaction speed is more or less kind of hard, sort of there, right? There's not much you can do to improve reaction speed at own metric, but what you can do is improve to almost instantaneous levels of knowing what to do when you see something, which is different than right. So it's like you can improve processing speed to almost zero. I guess is what I'm trying to say. In most cases, there's going to be some cases where like you don't know what's going on, so it's going to take a few seconds. But if your mental models are well enough developed, even like unfamiliar situations, you can probably figure out in under a second. So. I think that maybe the disconnect here is that maybe you were speaking of processing speed in the way that we were thinking of you were speaking of reaction time. So like maybe that was a miscommunication on our part.
No, it wasn't. I was just thinking of base reaction time.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree with you on that point.
Okay. Fair enough. But I think it's good.
So, in other news, farsighted people improved their vision by performing vision exercises involving locating a slightly contrasting spot against a similar background. After training, they could read 60% smaller type, read faster than before, and all of them could read a newspaper without glasses, which they could not do before. The improvements did not come from the change in the eyes, but rather changes in the brain's interpretation of the eye signals. Right? It's not that their eyes got less cloudy, it's that their brain got better at looking through cloudy eyes, essentially. Right? And in many ways, reaction speed is kind of like your eyes, right? Like it's like a hard-coded property of you in a lot of ways, right? Like base reaction speed isn't something that we've yet found a way to train. But if we're looking to improve reaction time, improving processing power kind of becomes the way to do that. To move on to kind of the next bit, he talks a lot about homeostasis, right? The major quote here being, the human body has a preference for stability. The technical term for this is homeostasis, which simply refers to the tendency of a system, any sort of system, but most often a living creature or some part of a living creature, to act in a way that maintains its own stability. The example that he gave was physical training. If you push the body during exercise outside of cellular homeostasis, it attempts to bring itself back into stability by adapting. Your body builds muscles so that you working out isn't hard anymore. It doesn't want things to be hard for you. It wants it to be easy. And once it then makes it easy, you stop improving. You get to a point where you can easily do what was difficult before, and your muscles will stop growing. In order to continuously improve, you must continuously push yourself outside of the comfort zone of homeostasis. However, if you push too hard, you risk injuring yourself and suffering a major setback. So, the kind of major lesson here is that you need to stay just outside of your comfort zone for the best results. You don't want to go too far outside such that you can't make any progress at all, or that you get injured. But you also can't be so comfortable with what you're doing that it's easy for you.
Now I have a question.
Sure.
How would you apply that to League? Because for me, if you got outside the comfort zone in League, you're basically putting in a scenario you've never been before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since you've never been before, you probably lead to your death in League. How do you do that without getting reported?
Yeah. How do you... It's a good question.
I like
a
it.
lot of
That
people...
actually is a really good question.
Yeah, like a lot of people... So yeah, I'm going to write that one down. That's actually like fantastic. How does one make League easier for themselves as a new
Without
player
beating their asses off,
without
getting reported.
hardcore feeding?
Yeah. The answer is you hardcore feed.
Is it the hardcore feeding that's more problematic, or the reporting? Like getting
Yes.
reported
Reporting.
and blamed?
Slash
Okay.
getting flamed, slash getting reported.
'Cause, I mean, that's a good point, right? Because, like, if you're really bad at League, other people who are also just as bad as you are going to flame you for being bad, and it feels bad, right? So it's like, how do you get, go through that and, still
I think
able to, like, make progress?
there are a number of ways that you see that are really good, right? So number one is, if it's literally your first time playing League, right, I would not recommend immediately jumping into PvP. I think that is an insane idea, right? I would say play through the tutorial first, and then go int like 20, 30, 50 games against beginner bots, right? Just get used to moving your mouse around, controlling your camera, or not, maybe play with locked camera, right? And clicking around, pressing the buttons that fire off your abilities, understanding your summoner spells, buying some items. Don't have to be good items, just buy some of them, right? When you see your gold is high, go back to base and purchase an item. Look at whichever one looks fun to you, right? Like build all blue items, build all purple items, build all red items, right? Just pick a theme, go with it, do some item buying, right? Do whatever is difficult but doable, right? You want it to be, if you get to the point in normal games, or not in normal games, in like, custom games or verse AI games, where you feel like, your mental bucket is only 40% full, right? Maybe that signals it's time to move up to another level, right? If you're somewhere between like 70 and 80% full, right? I would argue that the challenge level is good, right? Mm-hmm. So once co-op versus AI starts being too difficult, I might move to A ranks. Right? You get to a point where bots are no longer a challenge. You've figured out kind of the bugs in their AI, and you're able to play even against intermediate bots successfully every game, right? And then we'll start transitioning a little bit into PvP, and you start playing on Howling Abyss. There's no map to worry about. There's no movement to worry about. You don't have to worry about when to base. All you really kind of have to worry about is hitting skill shots, dodging skill shots, and getting familiar with whatever champions you have on your account, right? This then allows you to learn a couple of really important fundamental mechanics like clicking and camera control, especially if you have somebody who's better at the game than you that can kind of help guide you through these early stages, and especially that basically turns it into deliberate practice instead of purposeful practice, right? Somebody helping you through. The next step after ARAMs is almost certainly normal games, right? You get to a point where you're comfortable playing PvP and you have a couple of champions that you've decided that you like. Well, hop into a normal game, right? All of the rules will be the same as what you were familiar with in Co-op vs. AI. Assumably you had somebody that kind of helped you figure out how to build some items that didn't suck. Maybe you just follow a basic guide for a champion, right? That just kind of dictates you buy the same items every game. And you just kind of come up with a very, very simple mental model of how the game works, and you jump into normals and you start having fun. I highly recommend playing socially with friends, right? Find a group of people that you like, and that kind of takes away a lot of the issues of feeding and getting flamed and getting reported, because assumably if you have a group of 5 friends that you can get together and play with, then they will be nicer to you than somebody who doesn't know you, right? And there are a lot of really great places to meet beginner players. I would say, posting on the forums is a really great way to do it. Posting on Reddit is a really great way to do it. Even like in-game groups, I feel like that did they get deleted?
They got deleted.
They kind of did. They're kind of there, but
yeah, it's sort of, it's like not really a thing, right? But like even Discord communities, right, are a great way to meet other players who are roughly in the same skill bracket as you, and find people who aren't going to be so frustrated that you're having a hard time. That would be.
There comes a point where you want to take things seriously, and like maybe you know right away that you want to take it so seriously that you don't want to like build bad habits or something. And at that point, maybe it's not about just exploring the game and having fun. Maybe then it's about doing a lot of research, building a preliminary mental model, avoiding bad habits, getting a teacher, just making sure that you do the things that you would do if you were trying to learn to play the piano or something.
Yeah.
So what you're saying
Study
is
a
just
bunch
like,
of mods.
so before actually getting into a game, learning mid, in my example, I should just get a list of all the skills and fundamentals of mid lane around it first, and then play in the game.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay.
And I would argue, play normals before you play ranked. Play
Sure.
50, 100 games of normals on various different mid champions, and try it out there in a lower stress environment where people are not gonna flame nearly as hard, right? If somebody doesn't have their rank on the line, right, all that they're gonna have is their internal desire to win the game, and that's a lot less for a lot of people. So it tends to be a lot more chill.
As a personal anecdote, before playing ranked, I had won 1,000 normal games.
I think that's a really good number.
I had about 1,000 wins before I even thought about ranked as well.
Yeah, same for me. 1,000. I think I even got up to, and there was kind of a rule of thumb that was being thrown around in my friend group at the time, which was that if you have 1,000 normal games, you're probably okay to start heading into ranked. If you have 2,000 normal games, you probably understand the game pretty well.
Well, then on top of that, that's just kind of like a rule of thumb. So I mean, if you want to go into ranked and get booty blasted and improve that way, that's totally fine too, right? Nobody's stopping you. So it's like it's like,
of course not. And matchmaking is there simply to make sure that however
you get booty blasted at the
if
proper
you get
level.
booty blasted, you'll get booty blasted at the appropriate level, right? Matchmaking attempts within the best of its abilities, to match you with people of similar skill. You will go through a period where the games are unenjoyable and everyone's better than you and everyone's flaming you, but eventually you'll bottom out at somewhere that is more appropriate for your skill level.
And like the thing is that the thing I remember, it took me a long time to learn, is that when people are flaming you, they're not flaming you; they're flaming themselves internally at you. Like, kind of like they're almost always mad at themselves. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't. They're not going to remember you after that game. So it's like, why care about them?
Mm-hmm. To clarify that a little bit, it's the idea that like they aren't. It's not that they're mad at you. It's they're mad at what you did, right?
Fair enough. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah, it's a better way to. Yeah. So it's like it's not that they have anything against you as a person or what you stand for or anything like that. It's just that they're upset that another player in their game made a move that made it harder for them to win, right? And it's really a kind of, even though they will direct it at you, it's not like a personal anger, right? Even if they use personal language, right?
And the thing is too,
they
is
don't
that like
know enough about you to hate you. Basically,
the thing is too that like losing a game like League because you're stuck at it for 30, 40 plus minutes, depending on if you forfeit or not, it can really introduce really difficult to overcome senses of cognitive dissonance, where like losing means I'm bad, playing bad means I'm bad, and so like to protect their ego, they start flaming other people to sort of like take the responsibility off of themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you have to consider both of those angles when you think about it. Am I getting flamed, or are they actually mad at me, or?
Yeah. So those are some mental strategies to be less upset about getting flamed. So another kind of important thing regarding the idea of like homeostasis, right? I think is the idea that League actually, through its matchmaking system, does an absolutely tremendous job keeping you in homeostasis, right? It's trying to make it so you can win about half of your games, right? And if you want to win more than half of your games, you're going to be constantly trying to fight that homeostasis of the ranking system, right? You're going to be trying to become better than everyone else in your elo. And that, simply trying to climb pretty much by definition means that you are working against the homeostasis that exists, right? You're trying to become better than you are. The thing that is necessary to recognize, though, is that if you're aiming too high, too fast, right, then you end up running the risk of hurting yourself, just like in regular sports and regular physical activities, right? Especially because most people are not super great at understanding the difference between goals and expectations, right? Just as a little tirade on that, right? A goal is something that you understand that you haven't achieved yet, that you want to work to achieve, and that you'll be happy once you get there, right? It's cause for celebration once you arrive, right? An expectation, on the other hand, implies that you should already be able to do the thing. It implies that it should take no work to do the thing, because ostensibly you can already do it. And you should feel negative emotions if you can't meet the expectation. The idea is I should be at least this good by this point, right? And so if you're walking into your games with a lot of expectations and not very many goals, then that can be a big reason why playing feels bad, right? So be sure that you're not expecting yourself to climb, that instead you have a goal to climb, and that you do your best to accept that wherever you're starting from is fine. Everyone in the game will tell you that it is absolutely shameful to be anything less than the best player in the universe. And those people are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. It is okay to be silver. It's okay to be iron. It's okay to be anything. You are playing a video game. If you can figure out how to enjoy yourself, then you're doing it right. But if you want to improve, then obviously that's like a different metric, right? Now you have to do all sorts of different stuff in order to figure out how best to do the thing. But even if you're trying to improve, you shouldn't expect yourself to improve. You should make it a goal to improve, right? You're going to try a bunch of different things, and like we've been saying in private for a lot of time now. League is a game for which deliberate practice, in the sense of peak, that is, practice guided by an instructor that knows what you need to do to become like a top performer, is impossible. The game has only been around for about 10 years. People do not know how to play it well yet. The game is still developing. Even the pros are still getting massively, massively better year by year. And as such, deliberate practice is not possible yet. Instead, we have to settle for purposeful practice, which we talked about in the last meeting, which essentially boils down to, get outside of your comfort zone, fight homeostasis, but do it with clear goals, in a focused way, plan to achieve those goals, and ways to know whether or not you're achieving your goals, metrics, and figuring out a way to maintain motivation, right? So purposeful practice is about as much as good as you're going to get in League. So, if you have experience in something like music or a traditional sport that's been around for hundreds of years, recognize that improving in League is going to be quite a bit different. You're going to struggle to find coaches that know what they're talking about, and you're not really going to get a nice polished improvement experience in the same way. It's a lot more kind of guess and check sort of stuff, and a lot less here's the thing, do the thing. So
one thing I did want to mention, that the vast majority of people who talk about a certain rank being bad are pretty much all universally under that rank. So you have to really consider, you need to think about it. How many people are sitting there saying Diamond 4 is bad is actually Diamond 4 or higher?
Well,
less than 3% of them.
About two, yeah, exactly.
So it's like 97% of the people who are telling you that they're bad are statistically platinum or lower. So what does that mean for, how much credibility do they actually have when they're telling you that they're bad?
Some.
and people don't think about that a lot. They just say the guy's saying, "Oh, you're so bad," and it's kind of me. It's like, "Oh man, I'm so fucking bad." That guy said I'm bad. I need to go check his LPGGs.
Get this out. Check this out, right? If somebody in your game is telling you that you're bad, they're bad too. They're in your game. Matchmaking put you together.
Also, I think it's funny how people call some pros bad, even though they're pros.
Yeah, right.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But they're just like, oh, Froggen said it, they're bad. That mean they're bad.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Those people have a very unrealistic idea of what's actually bad.
The other thing too
people
is
are just
is
very good at
definition of
repeating what. Yeah, and people are we are really good at imitating other people. So when people say, "Oh, they're bad," then we are like, "Yeah, they're bad."
Yeah.
And it's like the high elo streamers have a very toxic impact on the community regarding that. They're absolutely awful.
Yep.
And I hate them.
Yeah.
Familiarity
And that's
is
I think it's also
easily
because of the
sustainable
high elo streamers, but yeah.
Yeah.
I want to
They
clarify-
get the most views. Like they are the thing that get most exposed about high elo.
I am the view. Yeah.
I also wanted to clarify the goals versus expectations.
Uh-huh.
So I think what you said before is that if someone has expectation to improve, they already assume that they've improved.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And they don't do work. But if you have a goal to improve, you're working towards that goal.
Mhm.
Is that right?
You understand that you're not there yet, and that you need to put in work to get there, right? If
Okay.
if the goal is, if the goal is to be good, right, then you understand that you're not good yet, and that you need to work to get there, and that when you do get there, you'll be happy, and you can be satisfied that you've done a thing. But there's no shame in not having achieved a goal yet. If there was, then no one would set any goals, because why would you, right? Like, that would be stupid, right? Like, you set a goal and you immediately have to feel ashamed that you haven't gotten there yet? What? Doesn't make any sense, right? There has to be some expectation that it's going to take some time, right? Practice takes time, by definition, right? On the other hand, an expectation is very immediate. If you expect yourself to be good, then you're saying, I am already good. And any evidence to the contrary is wrong, basically, right? It's basically just like flat out denial of the reality of the situation, right? And as a result, there's no reason to put in work to get better, because you feel like you already deserve the rank that you want, right? If you expect yourself to be diamond, rather than having a goal to reach diamond, then why would you work, right? You're already good enough to reach diamond. You just have to play more, right?
Mhm.
And so you'll end up having no motivation to practice. You'll end up being extremely disheartened when the results that you get don't match what you believe should be happening, because you've set this expectation. And you'll end up, it sounds harsh, but you'll end up being a hard stuck shitter. You'll just be bad forever, right? So instead of forming expectations, be gentle with yourself. Understand that goals are goals; they take time, and accept that it's okay to start anywhere, right?
And accept that you aren't bad. You just can be better.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You'll never get anywhere if you spend all your time telling yourself, "I'm so bad, I'll never be good," because you'll be so bad that you'll never get good, right? You have to be willing to accept that you have done some things right, figure out what those things are, and then figure out how you can do it better. This is kind of the approach that I have to take.
Your mom
Yeah, that
was
makes
just
sense.
asking where you are. It's getting late,
Yeah, I know. I'm doing a book club. I'll be over soon. So
I have to go now. Sorry.
gotcha. So,
Okay. See ya, guys.
see ya.
Later.
Yeah.
I didn't have a huge amount left to talk about. I think the only other topic that I wanted to eventually get to was, there's this idea that, like, if you atrophy, if you stop practicing, the changes in the brain will start to fade, right? The matter gets repurposed yet again, right? So, in some ways, it almost seems like this implies that in order to reach high levels of performance, one needs to be discontent in some way. Because otherwise, why would you push outside one's comfort zone, right? Why do hard work if you're already satisfied? This is the question that I think I will leave the group to answer during this week. Think about it, come up with some answers, and if any of you are watching from Royal Library or on the stream, feel free to write in a DM to me. Atherton Space Wing #0001, and at the beginning of next meeting, we will take a look at the answers to that. Very quickly, let's do what we said we were going to do last time. Let's go around and talk about, like, what's your single number one biggest takeaway from this particular meeting. Shall we start with you, Dilgo?
No, we started with me last time.
Okay, we'll start with Morbite then.
Okay.
Got him!
Well, I went second last time, so no. No, I'm kidding. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing that I pulled out was the idea of just... I think clarifying for me the difference between reaction time and like visual cues has been really helpful. The idea that, like, maybe it's not reaction time that's the big differentiator. It's what you know and how you're doing it, right? And it's like, yeah, maybe base reaction times are important, but if you have somebody who knows the same amount as you and have a similar amount of reaction time or a better reaction time, maybe that'll make the difference. But in most cases, it probably won't.
Yeah.
And so, like, thinking about improving reaction time doesn't seem to make a lot of sense then in that case. And also, I think our discussion about metrics really clarified again for me, like, that I am heading in the right direction as far as, figuring out, like, what am I doing? How do I do it?
Yeah, that's mine, for the record. My takeaway this week is that I think you've actually come up with a fantastic way to figure out metrics for skills that you want to work on. You start with like a fundamental rule of the game, and come up with a metric that relates to that, right? In basically any game, any sport, there's an objective, right? And if you just start with the objective of the game, you very quickly start coming to some things that obviously you must do in order to win the game. And starting with one of those, creating metric for that, and then creating smaller metrics as you observe the challenges and issues that surround maximizing that very simple, very basic metric. Allows you to then go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and identify skills that are good to work on. I think that is a fantastic way to do that, and I'm going to be taking that into my coaching moving forward. How about
I think too, one thing I would
Sure.
maybe caution toward, just in case, because I'm not sure if it's a problem, but people in this room have a pretty good knowledge of what the game's fundamentals are, right?
You are not
for somebody somebody watching this who's like, okay, I'm just gonna go make some metrics forehead, but don't really know, like, you have to be careful not to be like, I'm just gonna, like, hey, maybe my metric's gonna be X thing, but it turns out X thing's not super helpful and going completely the wrong direction, right? So,
Sure.
being able to make metrics, I think, is a skill developed knowing the game.
Being
so
able
if you
to
can't
make
the
metrics that actually make you better at the game is a skill. But being able to create metrics and then work towards them is a separate skill, right? Simply being able to make the changes in your game that you want to see made is in itself valuable practice, even if you don't actually get better. Simply being able to consciously make a change to your game will allow you to become better in the future once you get a better understanding of what you should try to work towards. And if all that you do is just make a change and then look at your win rate, look at your KDA, these are the sorts of things that will eventually
they'll
be reasonable. They'll be reasonable measures. Especially if you're working on something that's pretty small, maybe you won't see much change. But for a lot of the things that a lot of people are going to start working on pretty immediately, you got a lot of white belts, you got a lot of blue belts in this game, right? So if you're somebody who's relatively new or somebody who's relatively low rank, you'll probably be able to find something that's a relatively small change that you'll be able to make that'll end up having a pretty large impact, right? And so,
just need to be careful about going in the wrong direction. But given the way that people learn League and look stuff up, it's more difficult than you would think to go the wrong way.
Yeah, most people know something they should probably be doing, but they've been putting off because it seems too hard or too boring. That's a really great way to start, right? Take the thing you've been avoiding doing that you know is good and start trying to figure out a metric for that. Dilga, how about you?
Honestly, it's probably the same thing as you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's... it's not definitely the same thing as you.
I mean, that was a really, really important point to make.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding. Far and away, I think the most important point of this whole discussion. So, neat stuff. Moribite big brain. So sick.
Yeah, when I put it to use, it does come up with good stuff.
Yep. So, like I was saying, I think that especially if we're going to have more people in like we had today, I think
Okay,
one chapter is all we're ever going to be able to get through. So let's go ahead and read chapter 3 for next week. And I look forward to discussing it then.
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. Catch
See
you guys
ya,
around.
guys. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Peace.
Peace.